So the brain does not necessarily have a whole lot of different mechanisms like, well, your brain's evolved to respond to a particular drug this way, but you're going to respond to this addiction this way or this. It's not all different. It's kind of all very similar in terms of pain, pleasure, balance, right? And so any addiction you're looking at, there's similarities in getting rid of it. And that includes a previous addiction to the X. The process you go through to get over a breakup is very similar to an addiction because you're actually addicted to the neurochemicals that you felt from that stimulus, which happens to be your X. Okay. So let's get into, going to share the screen. All right, all that stuff. I'd say it's a positive thing, right? You're going to get pleasure from doing that. Okay. Now, when you stop watching a video, or video ends, or you stop watching YouTube videos. In this example, there's a pain now. Some level of pain gets signaled in the brain to balance out the pleasure. So I'm talking about the pain and pleasure balance here. Remember, your brain is fighting for homeostasis all the time. Even if homeostasis is bad in that sense, right? If you're surviving there, your brain wants to put you back into that homeostasis, okay? Back to this baseline state. Now, you can change your baseline, of course, for better or for worse, but that's where your brain fights to kind of put you at. And it does that, too, with this balance between pleasure and pain. And so when you seek out pleasure and you receive a bunch of pleasure, let's just say from something small that's not a substance, that's a substance that's affecting your body in a chemical way, even something simple like YouTube, right? You're getting pleasure from that. And then when you stop, you're unaware, unconsciously, you're receiving pain signals. And those pain signals are not like, ouch, I'm in pain, my arm hurts because I can't watch this video. It's not that kind of a pain. It's a withdrawal of the stimulus, and then it makes you want to watch another video because now you're no longer getting those feel-good chemicals from doing that activity that you now associated pleasure and a rise in dopamine and a rise in happy neurochemicals from. So the source is removed, and now those chemicals start to come back down to baseline, which creates what we define as pain. Although it's not, again, not necessarily like, ouch, I slammed my hand in a door kind of pain, but it's something you're unconsciously aware of. And I say unconscious because you don't feel pain usually from stopping something like a YouTube video. You just feel like you want to watch another video. All right, because that's your brain going, hey, this felt really good over here. Shoot, we're losing that feel good feeling. Let's go get that back from that stimulus. And so then that causes you to seek out that pleasure again. Now, something that is not incredibly overwhelming on those systems like YouTube videos. You may have a craving to go watch a video again, but you're not going to lose your job over it and not go to work because you're watching videos necessarily, right? You're going to go back to normal and do your thing, and maybe you would like to go watch a video later, but you're just not. It's not something that has a massive hold over you where it interrupts what other things you'd want to do or accomplish. Well, an addiction is where this pleasure, that thing that you're doing, either happens so frequently or is so great in terms of its pleasure stimulus that when you are now not getting that stimulus, the pain to balance it out becomes so great that your desire to seek out that pleasure, even just to get back to baseline in a lot of cases, is strong. It's so strong that you find yourself having difficulty moving away and controlling that ability to not seek that same stimulus out again. So in this case, if you were addicted to YouTube videos, like a serious addiction, when you're not watching those, you would find it hard to focus on other things unless you go until you go back to get that relief from the pain by watching the video. And so what happens with an addiction too is people stop really getting pleasure after a point, and the pain, especially for something like substances, ramp up so severely. This pain ramps up so severely that you're seeking out that stimulus just to get out of pain and into a baseline, right? And that's what makes addiction so powerful. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So that's from the Alpha Mindset course. Just a few minutes of one of the module. Well, it's actually one module that's 3 parts on addiction and breakups too, because I talk about that in there. And the reason why I address breakups and addictions particularly is just because people have a lot of addictive behavior, and breakups are a part of that. You can't really be your alpha version of yourself if you're hung up on an ex or a past relationship. And so you have to be able to move on from that with clarity and happiness that that situation is over with, and not having that stuff continue to affect you, your mental, emotional state, and your behavior moving forward long after the breakup. I see some of your guys' questions, so that's good, and I will address those here in a minute. But hopefully that gives you a quick explanation of the idea of pain, pleasure, balance. Now, here's kind of I do want to say, all right, people with substance abuse addictions, the chemical aspect of it can affect the neurochemicals and the brain chemistry so great that sometimes can make near permanent changes in some of the really addicting substances, which means that, like, say, a heroin addict, someone real serious, they cannot get to a baseline again back into their pain pleasure balance. There's always a risk of them going back after a point if that affected that person in that way. And so with certain chemical addictions, this is why I always say you need to talk to someone local who can keep you accountable and set up a what I call a PACE plan in the modules. You have to watch the modules to figure that out. But a primary thing that you do if that addiction is sort of creeping up on you, a primary, a secondary action, a contingency action, and an emergency action. But you need somebody to keep you accountable that can be with you or monitor you, like in your local area. Like, I can't do it from here in a different state or country over Zoom. If you have an addiction thing, you need accountability locally and where you're at. If it's a substance abuse thing and it's severe enough where it took your brain to a point where that pain pleasure balance is just out of whack, and there's always, at least for a long time, maybe years to come, a draw to go back to that substance. So I just want to make that really clear, that some people who are severely addicted to a substance, severe drug addicts, severe alcoholics, hey, some of you might be able to do a course like this and then be good, all right? But most of you, if you're severely addicted to a substance, yeah, this will help. It'll help give you an understanding that you probably didn't have before, but you still need local accountability. That means an addiction counselor. That means support groups, sponsorships, things like that. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. So I want to make that clear here. I don't want people, gravitating towards some solution and not getting that local accountability if that is in fact what you need. Because at that point, there comes a point where most people have power over their addictions, but it gets to a point with chemical substances, right? With actual drugs or alcohol, where maybe you can't have power over that anymore, and you need to turn that power into somebody else. Okay. You have to have power. You get power over yourself by seeking out that accountability. And so that's the AA mantra is that they're powerless over the addiction. I don't think that's appropriate for everybody with every addiction. But for people who are severely addicted to a substance, they do need to consider themselves, at least for a short time, powerless, and give that accountability up to somebody, because you just can't do it on your own. All right. So that's on substances. But obviously, most people who are addicted to substances or just have too much of a substance in their life, like maybe cigarettes, maybe alcohol, right? Maybe some, drugs or porn addictions, different things. You can actually get power over those things if it hasn't done a severe chemical change in your body or in your brain. You know what I mean? So now that said, we understand that pain, pleasure, balance, what that is. And so you're dealing with that with substances, any sort of addiction. What's interesting is, so the brain does not necessarily have a whole lot of different mechanisms like, well, your brain's evolved to respond to a particular drug this way, but you're going to respond to this addiction this way or this. It's not all different. It's kind of all very similar in terms of pain, pleasure, balance, right? And so any addiction you're looking at, there's similarities in getting rid of it. And that includes a previous addiction to the X. Okay. And so to address the X thing, here's what it is. And here's the actionable part of it. For the first, and this goes for any addiction, but I'm just going to zero in on dealing with breakups for now. So the first 2 weeks is going to be the hardest in terms of breaking that addiction. Now, I say 2 weeks, that's once the initial anger or even relief wears off from the initial breakup. Or, this is when you start to really get upset and miss the person. So if she broke up with you, that 2-week period probably starts pretty immediate. If you got in a big fight and you're really mad at her and you don't want to, you're like, I don't even want to look at her right now, you're really super pissed, you're going to do that for a couple days first. And then your 2 weeks start. When you start to feel like that oxytocin that need for that oxytocin, you start to really gravitate towards wanting that other person. And even if you hate the other person, you still want that addiction, that addictive quality of that relationship. You want to calm that anxiety, calm that addiction through this other person. This is why guys have a real hard time, almost like impossible, really, unless they treat it like an addiction. They have a real hard time not contacting an ex. The person breaks up with them, and a week later, they're finding ways to contact them. And when people are in an addictive mindset, your brain will literally play tricks on you. You will play tricks on the logical part of your brain so that you can justify dipping into whatever that addiction is. All right. Drug addicts do it with drugs, alcoholics do it with alcohol, and you're going to do it with your ex if you're not careful. You're going to find reasons to rationalize all kinds of crazy bullshit within that first couple weeks. And that anxiety is going to be incredibly high. And so the first 2 weeks is the most critical time, because if you are reaching out to her or receiving and looking at texts from her, responding, seeing her during that time, going to have that talk for whatever reason, looking at her social media and ruminating, looking at old pictures, all of that stuff is stimulating the addiction that you have to that person in that relationship. And you will rationalize doing it. You're just trying to feel better. Your pain pleasure balance in your brain is off, and you're just in pain now. And you need to get just to a baseline so you can focus, concentrate. You're going to want to just see what she's doing on her social media. She meet another guy yet? Let me look and see what she's posting. Let me try to interpret what her posts are on Instagram. That kind of stuff. You're doing it to cure or to calm that anxiety that you have. And I call it an anxiety. I mean, it's lack of a better term, but really it's that addiction and you're trying to calm that. And so almost any addiction, it's 2 weeks of detox. And so when that breakup happens, you need to detox from that person for a full 2 weeks. Now, let me say this too, because people, what happens is you start rationalizing wanting to work it out, or double like questioning your stuff, your behavior. Did I do everything right? Maybe I should try to remedy it so I can get closure. And these are the things and the thoughts that happen to you within that couple weeks.
Let's face it, if you're a man, then you are probably dealing with problems and challenges with women. Your success with women literally boils down to one thing. When you have this one thing, all of your troubles disappear and you start having amazing experiences that most men can only dream of. And that's the good news. But the bad news is, if you don't have it, nothing else will work. Advice on the internet and all the best pickup and game skills out there will fail without you mastering this one thing. And that one thing is frame. Develop the skills in establishing and keeping frame, and everything else follows. That is the big secret. And the good news is, I can teach you all you need to know about it. Amazing Life with Women is just one click away. After this video, click on the link in the description to schedule a free consult to see if you are a good fit. Click the link and let's get started.
And so here's the thing. Let me just state this out for you guys, because, and here's my rule, my policy, and this is the thing that you guys need to adopt, all right, as alpha version of you, okay? You really need to adopt this. You're in a relationship with somebody, you get a conflict, you have trouble. Let's say a breakup might happen, right? Let's say she's upset, she's angry with you, you're whatever, there's something happened, and a breakup is like on the horizon possibly. Or even if she's not upset and angry and that's not where it's coming from, just she's not feeling she wants to be in the relationship, whatever. There is no working on the relationship unless she's in the relationship. Okay? In other words, if you're in a committed relationship, an LTR, she doesn't get to break up with you and then continue to work on the relationship with you, because she's not working on the relationship. Understand, if she breaks up with you, all of the stuff to try to get clarity and closure, that's all her feeling better about the breakup so she can move on. Every bit of contact you have with her is a springboard into another dude's D. We'll put it like that. Visualize that you having that conversation with her to answer some questions about something that happened after she made the unilateral decision to leave the relationship. You are literally projecting her into the next guy's D. Imagine you lifting her up and then plopping her on another dude's D with every contact, every conversation you have after a breakup. So that's what I want you to imagine in your head. Hopefully that'll help you so you don't do that anymore. All right? Because you're trying to cure or calm your addiction down by having these conversations and trying to get some clarity or closure. And then she says she wants this clarity and closure. It's not that she thinks that's what she wants. It's not. That's your addiction brain, her addiction brain reacting to that stimulus. All she wants to do is feel better, calm her anxiety, because once her anxieties are calm, well, then she can move on to the next guy faster. You understand? She can move on from you much faster when the anxiety goes away. So she wants to have this closure and this awesome little, this good feel good stuff with you where you guys are on good terms, because she doesn't want to feel bad and feel anxiety to go hop on other dudes. That's what it is. Every single time, 100% of the time, that's what it is, whether she recognizes it or not. Why do I say that? Because if she needed closure and she needed to work on stuff and clarity and all that stuff, she could do that in the relationship. If she wanted to be with you instead of wanting to project herself on the new dude who she thinks is going to be better than you, right? Whoever that guy is off into the future, she would not leave the relationship. If she wanted to work on something and get, well, maybe we need to work on this and talk about it. Well, she could do that without breaking up with you. Do you understand? And so for me, my thing is, and this needs to be your role too, no closure, no discussions, nothing happens any longer other than logistics and a separation once a breakup happens. That's it. She has to choose either to be in a non-platonic exchange with me, or she's choosing otherwise. And if she chooses otherwise, I'm immediately going through my process of moving on and breaking my addiction from her. Okay? So that's what you need to do, because anything else, you're actually just helping her move on. If she's not meeting you in order to see you and have some sex and figure it out, and okay, we're not really broken up, then there is no other reason for her to meet with you. If she's unilaterally deciding to end the relationship, then that's it. Okay? You have to do that, but you're not going to. Most of you guys listening to me right now will not do this. Why is that? Because it's an addiction. And so you have to understand and tell yourself within the first 14 days that the first 14 days are the hardest. Okay? Because they are. And so that's the time where you're going to want to rationalize reasons to contact her, and she's going to do it too, because she wants to calm her anxiety. Don't let that happen. All right, let her anxiety be there, to where the only thing that you're allowing is for her to call to try to want to see you in a non-platonic way. All right, and again, she's not going to call you and be like, okay, let's be happily in a relationship again. I made a mistake 3 days ago, but hey, I want to come over. I just want to spend time with you. I want to see you. So we're seeing each other then. We're not actually broken up. All right, come on over. That's what's happening. Okay? Because otherwise, any of that is her trying to calm her addiction anxiety to the relationship, and then you trying to do it too, and you don't serve yourself. Every time you participate in that, you facilitate the loss of that relationship every single time. And so the first 2 weeks are the hardest. That's when you're detoxing. Now the next 2 weeks, that's when you have what I would call residual effects. So that's when you're going to start wanting to do replacement behaviors and activities during that first 2 weeks, where instead of contacting her, you're doing something else that's more productive and better for you. But in that first 2 weeks, it's especially, and every day is harder than the next day in that couple week period. It doesn't really work that well. It's hard for it to work. All right. It makes it, you're going to be constantly fighting in that couple weeks. Now, those replacement behaviors start to take hold the next 2 weeks. So you start to feel better, and those replacement behaviors start working. But then unfortunately, what happens is, though, you're still susceptible to falling back, because then your guard will come down. And with your guard down, you'll think, oh, well, I could have that conversation about the past relationship, or I could do this, I could do that. No, once it's broken up, it is no longer a relationship. What it is it's either something brand new, which is she's a plate now, or whatever it is, and whatever that looks like, or it's nothing. Okay. But you're not going to go back to the old relationship. And so when you're susceptible to that within that next couple weeks, sometimes even more so than the first couple weeks, because your guard will come down. And then 2 more weeks after that's what I call reassimilation. So those residual effects and pulls start to go away now too. So by a month or 30 days in, neurochemically, you're actually about even. But what you now have is attraction triggers and potential trauma based on the past relationship. And so the next couple weeks is where you don't have those same addictive feelings, but there's a tendency to want to fall into old patterns. And old patterns felt good before. And so you'll fall into old patterns, even just patterns of how you run your normal day, and you'll find yourself putting yourself in her orbit or contacting or allowing that stuff to happen. And then you can if there's trauma there, which there's often trauma, which means a scarring in, something that stimulates a danger, right? Because it caused pain. So now your brain sees that as a problem or a danger. When you tickle or stimulate that trauma within that, even though the addiction's technically kind of over with at a neurochemical level, you're stimulating trauma that it puts you right back to where you started when you allow that contact to happen over the next 2 weeks. And so that's about the time frame. You're looking at about 6 weeks. Now, if you're not over your ex in 6 weeks, and I said this on rule 0, and a couple of guys were like, well, yeah, I mean, what do you, like, they weren't challenging me, but I could tell they didn't really believe it. And I'm telling you, because I've done it with myself and with clients, and I'm talking people who are married for a long time. I'm talking people with severe addictions to their partner. In 6 weeks, they were good. And so if you're not good in 6 weeks, that means that there's a trauma there that was created or some other issue. Now, in the course, I talk about trauma and how to address that. And so if that's the case, you work through that. I saw in the chat, I have to go back through the comments, but I saw somebody was like, well, I've been basically hung up on an ex for a year. Like, yeah, that stuff happens. And so when you're hung up long past the 6-week period, it's because a trauma was created. And it's because the addiction's still there because you didn't really break the addiction too. You were looking at her Facebook posts. You were ruminating over her. You weren't doing the activity. You're probably in contact with her. You weren't doing the activity that you needed to be doing during that first 6 weeks to get over it. And I talk about what that activity is in the course. Okay. Excuse me. So I talk about what that activity is because there's stuff you want to do. It's not going to automatically, magically go away in 6 weeks. There's stuff you have to do, and there's stuff that you, more importantly, have to not do. Okay, starting with the contact and the looking at her Facebook post and all that stuff. There's stuff that you have to do, and there's stuff that you have to not do, so that your brain is no longer addicted to that past relationship after 30 days. And after 6 weeks, you're fully assimilated into a new lifestyle. All right. That's without her. And although it may be new, you should be over and glad that the relationship is over because you have a new lifestyle now that doesn't include her. And that future should seem a lot brighter than it did when you were in a relationship with that person. Now, you might have some nostalgic moments past the 6 weeks where you're like, yeah, I remember we had some good times or whatever. But you're going to go right back to normal life. You're not going to ruminate and miss her and have all of these bad feelings because she was the one for you and all that stuff. You know what I mean? That's not what happens if you're doing good up here and you're healthy and you're in an alpha mind state. If you're not in an alpha mind state, past 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year later, you're still having issues with that ex. So if that's you, I know it's a lot of you guys because you've commented already. If that's you, if you're not at a point of outcome independence and of happiness, meaning outcome independence means it's going to be good without her. All right. You had wanted her in the past. That didn't work out. And that's good. All right. Someone said, I'm sorry about the breakup. You'd be like, no, it's good. Actually, it's a good thing. That would be your answer. You'd mean it. If you're not at that point in 6 weeks and you're not having trouble sleeping at night and thinking about her during the day and all that stuff, other than an occasional nostalgic moment, if you're not over that and glad it's broken up, and if you were to see her, you would be like, appreciative of what you experienced with her, but glad you're not with her. If you're not at that point in 6 weeks, that means we got work to do. Okay. And that means in the course, my recommendation, the lowest cost option is to get the course and work through those modules. Now, if that's not working, that means there's something that we're not applying in the right way. The exercises are there, but the application isn't good. So that means you need some accountability in the same way that somebody who's addicted to drugs or alcohol needs accountability from a support group or an addiction counselor or whatever. All right. You need a little bit of accountability on what you're doing and the activities you're doing to get over this person. And that's where consultation sessions or coaching sessions are good for that. And I would say normal average, I don't care how bad your one-itis was, it's usually about 3 consults. I got somebody good. Sometimes 1, sometimes a little more than that, but usually, I mean, even some very severe cases, it's about 3 consults with me, spread out between, over about a month period. And then they're on the right track because they just weren't able to be accountable to themselves, to the activity or the action plan that they needed to do in order to get over it. And so that's it. And now you can apply that same action plan to any addiction.